Today I fly a private jet. Sure, I have to share it with some other people, but that's the experience you get with JSX, the airline that brings the private jet luxuries to the public. So, using the timestamps below, follow our journey from Napa Valley to Hollywood. Welcome to Concord, California. This is an airport that used to see commuter airline services to San Francisco and Los Angeles mostly from the 60s to the 90s, but now it's mostly general aviation and JSX, who serves 3 cities from here. This is the new terminal, which opened a couple years ago. Last time we covered JSX, they still had their temporary looking space. This serves as the airport administrative offices, but also a terminal space for JSX. I'm here only 20 minutes before my scheduled departure since there's no security, and that's all JSX asks for. Checking in for JSX couldn't be easier. You give them your ID, they swab your bag to make sure there's no dangerous materials, and then they print a little receipt that will serve as your boarding pass. JSX doesn't use any terminals for any of their locations. They either have their own private JSX terminal, or they use the existing FBO that's used for chartered flights. This means that there are some extra amenities for all passengers. In the back corner they did have water and coffee and an assortment of snacks. Other than that, it looks fairly similar to a normal waiting area for any other gate, with assorted seating, some couches, but they did have a couple conference rooms, plus free and quick Wi-Fi. One of the reasons you only have to show up 20 minutes before your flight is because of TSA's Secure Flight Program, which is how JSX gets around the whole security thing. Essentially, when you book your ticket and give them your information, it cross-checks the passenger info against federal watch lists. Originally, this program was transferring passenger matching to operators. Now, however, it's back with TSA, and all commercial flights in the US are 100% TSA vetted since 2010. Once the Vegas flight boarded, it was time for the Burbank flight to board. Now, there's no security checkpoint as you know it, but there is still a simple scanner. Essentially, when you walk up to get your boarding pass scanned, you just carry your bags through there. They can look at the screen, look at your ID, scan your boarding pass, and then you get on board. JSX only operates the Embraer 135 and 145 aircraft. This flight is on the E135, which is in a 1-2 configuration, whereas the 145 is a 1-1 config. These aircraft aren't new by any means. They got them from an assortment of US regional airlines and then refreshed the interior. The 50-seat configuration that American used has become a 30-seat configuration now, so there's significantly more space. Plus, without the overhead bins, they've done whatever they can to make the small cabins feel marginally better and a bit more like it would on a private jet. Once you get on board, it does feel a little bit like a regional jet, considering you have the 1-2 configuration and some aging interiors. I'm in seat 10A, so I get the single seat on the right side of the aisle. There is no headrest, the seat's kinda short admittedly, but there are armrests on both sides with a little bit of recline, although considering none of their flights are that long, I wouldn't say it's the end of the world. There's a couple windows at each seat, but they did add charging ports, which was obviously not in the aircraft when it flew its previous life with American Airlines. There's a great sized tray table for a regional jet with a fun little pattern, and then a literature pocket below that with the stuff they need to put in there, but enough space for you to stash a laptop or chargers. There is actually a pretty good amount of legroom considering they got rid of 20 seats from the original configuration. And since there's no overhead entrance, you will have to put your bag down here, but even with that I found there to be more than enough space. Plus, considering that it's still a narrow-body aircraft, it has the overhead air vents. Private jet travel has always been one of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences. If that, considering the majority of people will never fly in a private jet. While it used to be only for people who owned a private jet, or knew someone who did, there's now other ways to get on one, and they vary widely in cost. Fractional ownership is one option, which sees multiple owners sharing a jet to minimize cost and risk while maximizing use. Each owner typically gets a certain amount of hours based on how much of the fractional ownership they buy, which does leave the owners competing over who gets the jets on which days. Private charters are more common considering you can choose which aircraft you want for that specific trip based on how many people you have and how far you need to go. There's private jet memberships, which makes sense if you want more than a one-off flight. You pay into a membership and let a concierge handle the reservations of jets. And lastly, and perhaps the only one affordable by 99% of the population, is public charter services like JSX. JSX essentially divided the cost of the jet amongst all passengers in order to offer a private experience to a group of 20 to 30 people. This is a major win for cost, considering that chartering a plane can be anywhere from $1,000 per hour for a small turboprop to $15,000 per hour for a long-haul Gulfstream type jet. This means that a round-trip flight from LA to Tokyo would run you a minimum of $300,000 just for the flying. On the other hand, while JSX's fares vary by route, they're typically under $300. So it's more than your average economy ticket, but definitely cheaper than first class, so you get the convenience and amenities of the private jets without the financial burden, and you just have to sacrifice by letting a few extra people into the space. It was kind of trippy being up here, considering that just a half hour ago I was in my Uber on the way to the airport. Now, I'm on an airplane on my way down to LA. Considering the flight from Concord to Burbank's only about 45 minutes, they wasted no time getting the food and beverages out. One of the good things about JSX is that all of the food and beverages are complimentary, and there's a menu in the seat back pocket. Normal soft drinks, tea, coffee, alcohol, mocktails, all the stuff you'd expect, totally free, plus a snack basket. Once they came through with those, I got a Coke, which was all I needed right now, and some snacks for free, to complement the free snacks that I also got in the terminal. Now, as far as the entertainment goes in flight, they do offer Wi-Fi, and you can see the instructions for that as well in the menu. It's one of the carriers that uses Starlink Wi-Fi, the second one I've ever seen, the first being Hawaiian Airlines, which means that once you're connected, you get some of the best in-flight Wi-Fi speeds I've ever seen. So who cares if there's no seatback entertainment? Most of their flights are about an hour, and you can stream Netflix or whatever other services you'd like without any buffering. Lastly, there is one lavatory on these aircraft at the back of the cabin. Now, on these small regional jets, the lavatories are typically fairly small, and this is no exception. However, they did perfect the finishes, so you get this nice sink look with a nice faucet, and the soap honestly smells great. In 2016, JSX was launched. At the time, short-haul air travel was a shrinking market. People quoted rising prices and dropping standards, so JSX decided to tackle that market by adding some competition in an effort to make short-haul travel enjoyable again, as people were spending more time at the airport than in the air. So in April 2016, JSX first flew on this very route between Burbank and Concord, connecting Hollywood with wine country. JSX is not technically an airline. They operate as an air carrier or public charter, officially falling under FAA Part 380. Part 121 is airlines, Part 135 is charters, Part 830 is the public charters, or JSX. This is a category the FAA added in 1997, and JSX operates it in a funny way. Essentially, there's two branches of the company. Deluxe Public Charter is a Part 135 charter airline that operates the aircraft. This way, they can utilize crew authorized for charter flights, not necessarily commercial flights, and FBOs or private terminals. Then JSX, as Part 380, charters the aircraft from Deluxe and resells the seats on those aircraft to the public. It's like if I chartered an airplane and then invited some friends along and made them pay their share, but with more legal nonsense involved. This is why JSX is able to operate out of FBOs or private terminals instead of the main terminals, and why they can bypass TSA checkpoints. They've now grown to 27 cities in the US and Mexico and partner with JetBlue and United. United just allows for mileage earning, while JetBlue has a full code share, although since JSX flights are out of private terminals, you do have to check in separately for a connecting flight, including collecting your bags. The recovery from COVID has brought about a new type of traveler, the high-spending leisure traveler, which was previously much more rare. Budget carriers are losing their customers to full-fare carriers. Full-fare carriers are expanding their premium offerings, and airlines like JSX can capitalize on this idea precisely. JSX was the first airline to really operate in this way, entirely as a private charter. The concept existed since the late 90s, but other carriers struggled trying to add this type of operation on top of their normal charter operations. JSX's model worked because they found that people didn't care about sharing the space on the aircraft as long as they had some of the luxuries. I mean, you rock up 20 minutes before departure, grab a coffee and snack, and just stroll on board. Then you land and you've got your rental car waiting for you. At that point, who cares about 20 or so other people sharing the cabin with you for an hour? This is my third time flying JSX, and they really are one of my favorite ways to travel. The bummer is that it's still a regional jet, so the cabins are small and the flight lengths are limited, but aside from that, we're talking about a private jet that just has to be shared with some other people. With private terminals, your experience may vary slightly depending on where you fly from. Burbank, for example, has a specific JSX terminal, as opposed to Concord having the airport management offices and terminal space shared. I don't think it makes a huge difference. I still had a free coffee and snacks while I waited to board, and I really only waited for about 5 minutes. The illusion of the private jet faded a bit when you step on board. In a 30-seat 1-2 configuration with an aging hard product, it looked a bit regional-like. Once you sit down, however, it does feel different. You've got like twice the amount of legroom, and with no overhead bins, it's noticeably bigger compared to the same aircraft operated by the main airlines. Then there's the in-flight product. Remember that most of their flights are about an hour. At that length, they offer free drinks and snacks, which is something that the major airlines don't even do. I was in Alaska Airlines first class from Burbank to San Francisco on my return, and all I got was a beer, no food. The Starlink Wi-Fi is also one of the greatest things to happen to air travel. This is the second airline I've used it with the first being Hawaiian Airlines, and it's so incredibly fast that you can watch Netflix or any other program without buffering whatsoever. Considering that there's aircraft that can't accommodate seatback TVs, I see this as the next best thing. Then, once you arrive, you're off the plane and at the curb in less than a minute. And if you checked a bag, you can get it off the cart. From curb to curb, the journey took me 1 hour and 12 minutes. For contrast, on my return flight of almost the same route, but with a normal airline, from curb to curb took me 2 hours and 40 minutes. So it took me more than twice as long when I didn't fly JSX. Sure, the route structure is limited, but if you find yourself on one of their routes, I can't suggest it enough. But what do you think? Let me know below, and until next Sunday, safe travels. I'll see y'all next time.